Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. In the description of this video, you can find my compiled link. Through there, you can find ways to support the channel, my other social media, and more. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. How's it going, everybody? CJ here, back with another video. We're doing a first thoughts today. This first thoughts is on Ojer Axonil, Deepest Might. This card, very interesting. I'm excited to try it out. I'm going to be running it in my Neheb deck, but we're going to be talking about it as a commander. There's a lot of very powerful things you can do with this card in the command zone. Before I hop into that though, remember, if you plan on buying any Lost Caverns of Ixalan product, please do so through the link in this description of this video. If you buy it through there, it helps and supports my content. There's a few different game plans I came up with that seem very synergistic with Ojer Axonil that I want to talk about today. We're going to be talking about pingers, because pingers can do a lot of extra damage with Ojer Axonil in play. There's a bunch of hate cards that can become extremely powerful. There's a very interesting storm build that I think could be a lot of fun and a unique way to build this commander. There's ways to make Ojer Axonil bigger so he's dealing more damage. After that, I'm going to talk about some additional cards that do small incremental damage that seem worthwhile in any of these builds, but don't specifically fit into one specific of the builds I previously mentioned. And then a handful of one-off cards and in the 99. So let's just jump on into this with pingers. For those of you that don't know, pingers refers to cards that you tap to deal damage to a creature or player. And a lot of these cards will tap to just deal damage to each opponent, which is really better in this deck. However, ones that can target creatures still have a lot of utility. So some of the pingers I wanted to mention are Barbed Field, not actually a pinger, but it turns your land into a pinger. Blister Spit Gremlin, Brimstone Trebuchet, Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh, extremely easy to flip this card in this deck. Chandra's Magmut, Cinder Pyromancer, Crackling Perimeter, interesting card in here because you're in mono red, but there are 7 gates you can put into this deck. So if you run Crackling Perimeter and have a few gates in play, you can do a lot of damage very easily. Goblin Fireslinger, Jeska, Sawblade Scamp, Spear Spewer is a fantastic card in this deck. Ojer Axonil breaks parity with Spear Spewer, making it so you still only take 1 damage, but your opponents take damage equal to Ojer's power. Sir Kara gets you card advantage, Thermo Alchemist, Unruly Catapult, and Endbringer. Along with those, Goblin Sharpshooter seems fantastic, especially when you throw on a Basilisk Collar, Gorgon's Head, or Gorgon's Flayer to give it Death Touch so it can just kill all of your opponent's creatures. If you're running all of these pingers that require to be tapped to activate, ways to untap them could be very powerful since you'll be able to use them again. You're not in blue, so there's a lot less options, but some of the options work in a pretty unique way. There's a lot of cards like Aggravated Assault and Savage Beating that untap all creatures you control and give you an extra combat step. You don't even need the extra combat step, it's more to use them to untap all your creatures. Aggravated Assault is 5 mana, untap everything. If you have 3 pingers that deal 1 damage to each opponent, instead it's 4 damage to each opponent with Ojer Axonil in play. So if you just tap all 3 of those, that's 12 damage to each opponent. If you spend an extra 5 mana to Aggravated Assault, untap them, tap them again, that's 24 damage. Cards like these can shorten your clock drastically. Also, 1000-Year Elixir is another way to untap, and it gives your creatures essentially haste for activated abilities, which works really well with these pingers. Moving on from the pinger strategy, I want to talk about some hate cards. There's a lot of really good cards in red that punish your opponents for doing things they're going to want to do by making them take small increments of damage. If the small increment of damage became 4 or more, it's going to be really hard and brutal for your opponents to overcome these cards. Some of these hate cards that you can build around with this commander are Aether Sting, Burning Earth, Cemetery Gatekeeper, Eidolon, Harsh Mentor, Mana Barbs, Pyrostatic Pillar, Rampaging Ferocidon, Repercussion, Roiling Vortex, Sardian Avenger, Scald, if you're in a blue heavy meta, Spell Shock, Storm World, Sulfuric Vortex, Zozu, Pain Distributor, and Immolation Shaman. If you go this route, you can also run cards like Blood Moon or Magus of the Moon, just because they're on theme with the game plan. There's a lot of good hate cards in red, but you're going to want to focus around the ones that cause your opponents to take damage, because they're going to take a lot more damage, and you'll be able to close out games very quickly while punishing your opponents and slowing them down. And the last archetype I wanted to mention is Storm. Storm seems really cool for Ojer Axonil. There's a lot of cards that whenever you cast instant and sorceries, they deal 1 damage to each opponent, so making that 4 damage lowers the necessary storm count drastically. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of expedite it and don't need to actually have a high storm count, since you're getting a lot more value out of the cards that you're casting. Some of the cards that seem to work really well as game enders for the Storm style deck include Firebrand Archer, Fiery Inscription, Electrostatic Field, Erebor Flamesmith, Gutter Snipe, Kessig Flamebreather, Rockslide Sorcerer, and Urabrask. Along with these cards, you're going to need a lot of card draw that's instant and sorcery based, so that way you can kind of refill your hand while getting all the triggers. Some of those that you can include are Crimson Wisps, Expedite, Crash Through, Needle Drop, which is kind of nice because it deals damage, along with Past in Flames and Underworld Breach, so that way you can utilize your graveyard to recast a lot of these cards. Outside of cards, the other limiting factor for storming off is mana. So rituals could work pretty well in this deck as well. So some rituals you might want to consider when building this deck include Pyretic Ritual, Desperate Ritual, Stormkiln Artist, not technically a ritual, but creates a bunch of treasures, Burgi, similar, Jeska's Will, and Mana Geyser. If you go this route, Grape Shot is a very easy game-ending card, auto-include in this type of deck. Now let's talk about ways to grow Ojer Axonil, because it does damage based on its power. So if you're able to grow it, it's going to deal a lot more damage, and all of these other cards are going to be significantly stronger. Some of the good instant sorceries to grow its power include cards like Brute Force, Titan Strength, Infuriate, Blazing Crescendo, Unleash Fury, Reckless Charge, and Seething Anger. Along with those, you can run Commander's Plate, which provides a lot of protection, Blackblade Reforged for a huge buff, Fire Breathing, so you can just dump mana into it to make Ojer stronger, and Arcane Teachings, which even turns Ojer Axonil into a pinger. Seems perfect for this deck. There's a handful of additional cards that do small incremental damage that seem worthwhile to put in. They just didn't really fit the other categories, but I wanted to mention them. Some of those cards include Chandra Just to Kill, Chandra Pyromancer, Chandra Torch of Defiance, Defiler of Instinct, which also is essentially ramp for this deck, Glinthorn Buccaneer, Goblin Chain Whirler, Impact Tremors, Leyline of Lightning along with Lightning Cloud, Olivia's Attendants, Pyrohemia, which can be disgusting in this deck, and Sarkin Dragon Soul. There's a handful of one-off cards that also just provide some unique effects that work really well with what Ojer wants to do. And those cards include Chandra's Incinerator to turn your player damage into creature removal, Inferno Titan, ETB and attack deal 4 damage to each opponent, seems phenomenal. Grafted Exoskeleton to turn your pingers into infect and kill people that way. Nullspine Dragon can draw you a ton of cards. Similarly, Neheb the Eternal can provide a ton of red mana. And a Virtue of Courage for essentially card draw. Lastly, in the 99, I just wanted to mention a couple of commanders that this card feels like it would slot really well into. I personally am putting it straight into my Neheb deck. Seems great in there. Immodane, it could be a fun, unique card inside of that deck. It's an insane finisher in Nekusar. It can provide a lot of extra damage in Shalai and Halar. And Firesong and Sunspeaker could find a great use for this card. That's everything I had for Ojer Axonil, Deepest Might. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Peace out, everybody.